In the forgotten corners of American history, there are stories so dark they were never meant to be spoken aloud. Buried beneath dusty courthouse ledgers, drowned in swamps, and whispered only in the nightmares of those who survived, lies the tale of a girl whose cruelty defied explanation. Tonight, we're not wandering into the supernatural. This is something far worse. This is the story of a child shaped by violence, twisted by power, and feared by an entire plantation. She was born into a world already soaked in fear, a place where the air itself seemed heavy with suffering, where the cries of the enslaved blended with the groan of the Louisiana swampland. From the moment she entered the world, those who lived on the plantation swore something felt different about her, as though the atmosphere shifted when she took her first breath. Her mother, a quiet woman known for her gentle nature, died only weeks after childbirth, leaving the infant to be raised by indifferent hands and overseers who cared more about labor quotas than human life. Without a mother's touch or protection, the girl grew up among the sounds of cracking whips, the shuffling of bare feet across hot soil, and the cold, expressionless faces of those whose spirits had been broken. Yet she did not appear broken, not even as a child. By the time she could walk, she had already learned silence. Other children cried. She watched. Other children hid when the overseer approached. She did not move. And when punishment rang out across the fields, when screams pierced the night and adults trembled, the girl sat with a stillness that unsettled even the most hardened workers. Some whispered that she did not yet understand suffering. Others whispered that she understood too well. Because every time something terrible happened on the plantation, she was always there, standing just close enough to see everything, yet distant enough that no one noticed her until her pale, unblinking eyes caught the light. The plantation itself did nothing to soften her. It was a place known for cruelty, a place where even the strong lost hope. Overseers rotated frequently because the land had a way of wearing men down, and each new overseer noticed her almost immediately, not because she misbehaved, but because she never did. She never cried, never asked for anything, never showed fear. If a whip cracked near her, she did not flinch. If lightning struck a nearby tree, she did not run. She simply observed the chaos with an unnerving calmness, as though she were studying something the rest of them had long forgotten to understand. Other children avoided her. At first they tried to play with her, but she watched them in a way that made them uneasy, as if every movement they made was being analyzed. She rarely spoke, and when she did, it was with a flat tone, void of emotion, as if she were imitating speech rather than participating in it. Animals sensed something too. Dogs refused to go near her. Horses bucked when she approached. Even the crows that circled the field seemed to grow louder when she was near, their calls sharper, more frantic. Yet the adults were too exhausted to pay attention to such things. Life on the plantation demanded constant labor, and any odd behavior in a child was dismissed as the result of trauma. But as she grew older, something else grew with her. An aura, almost palpable, that pulled the eyes of others even when they tried not to look. Workers reported waking in the night, feeling watched, only to find her sitting nearby, knees pulled to her chest, staring into the darkness without blinking. She never explained why she wandered in the night. She never explained anything at all. There were moments, rare but unmistakable, when people believed they saw curiosity blooming in her eyes, but it was never curiosity about flowers or animals or the games of childhood. Instead, she seemed drawn to suffering. If someone was punished, she stood close enough to see their face twist in agony. If a worker collapsed from exhaustion, she appeared beside them before anyone else did, not to help, not to call for aid, just to look, to watch how long they could hold on, to observe what fear looked like up close. Some adults began walking in groups, especially during the night, when the air grew thick and the cicadas fell silent, because sometimes they could feel her watching before they could see her. Despite her silence, she learned quickly. She memorized daily routines, escape paths, hiding places, and the flaws in every structure on the plantation. She knew which doors creaked, which floorboards groaned, and which parts of the swamp swallowed sound. She learned the overseer's patterns too. She knew when they were tired, angry, or distracted. But she never used this knowledge to run away. Instead, she used it to move unnoticed, slipping through shadows like smoke. It didn't take long for rumors to begin. The first came from an older woman who claimed she had seen the girl standing at the edge of the swamp during a thunderstorm, smiling faintly as if the storm were speaking to her. Then came the whispers from the field workers who said they heard her talking softly to herself in the early dawn, her voice calm and steady, as if she were responding to someone standing inches away from her. But rumors were nothing compared to the unease she created without trying. People swore the temperature dropped when she passed. They swore her footsteps made no sound. They swore that when she looked at them, it felt like she could see the parts of their soul they tried to hide. All of this might have still been ignored, dismissed as superstition, if not for what happened as she reached adolescence. Something changed. Something sharpened. Her calmness grew into something colder, and her fascination with fear became more deliberate. She began appearing at the exact moment someone was hurting. She started following women who were ill or injured, trailing behind them silently as if waiting for something. And though no one spoke it aloud, everyone felt it. The girl wasn't merely surviving the darkness of the plantation, she was becoming part of it, shaped by its cruelty yet untouched by its pain, as though she were made for the shadows that consumed everyone else. The first disappearance did not shake the plantation at first. People vanished often in those days, lost to escape attempts, disease, punishment, or the swamp itself. But something about this one was different from the beginning. The missing girl was young, healthy, and well-liked, someone who had no reason to run and every reason to stay close to the small circle of friends she trusted. She had been last seen just after sunset, finishing her chores near the washhouse, humming softly the way she always did. When she did not return to her cabin that night, her friends assumed she had been kept late for extra work. When she still didn't appear by dawn, the whispers began. But the most unsettling whisper was the one that came from the woman who shared her cabin, because she was certain she had seen the strange girl standing near the washhouse the night before, watching the missing maid with her cold, unreadable stare. The missing maid had been friendly toward the strange girl, one of the few who had tried to treat her like a child instead of something to avoid. She spoke to her, offered her food, and even tried to teach her little songs to cheer her on hard days. But the child never repeated the songs, never smiled back, never reacted at all. She simply followed her with her eyes, absorbing every detail with that unsettling stillness she carried like a second skin. On the morning of the disappearance, when people gathered in uneasy groups and tried to piece together what happened, the quiet girl stood alone in the shadows, her expression calm as the overseer barked orders for a search party. The search began with the usual places: the fields, the barn, the stables, the stretch of swamp that hugged the plantation like a hungry mouth. But they found nothing. Not a shoe, not a scrap of fabric, not even footprints leading into the mud. The overseer grew angry quickly, accusing workers of hiding information, threatening punishment if the girl was not found. Still, no one spoke her name aloud, but their thoughts drifted to the silent girl who'd been seen near the washhouse. She was questioned casually by the overseer, but she only stared blankly at him, offering no answers, no expressions, no hint that she even understood the severity of the moment. What unsettled the workers most was what she did after the search began. Instead of helping, instead of staying with the other children, she wandered through the fields alone, tracing the edges of the search areas with slow, deliberate steps. Some said she looked like she was retracing something. Others said she seemed to know exactly where not to look, avoiding the deeper parts of the swamp with an almost calculated precision. A few people claimed she was humming, a low, strange tune that did not match any song from the cabins, but none of them could recall the sound clearly later, as though their memories grew foggy when they tried to focus on it. Days passed, and the missing maid remained missing. Activity on the plantation continued, but a heaviness settled over everyone. The workers began whispering that the swamp had not taken her, nor had she run away. Something darker had happened, and the fear grew stronger because they had no evidence, no explanation, and no body. The only thing they had was the memory of the silent girl watching her the night before, standing so close, her shadow almost touched the maid's heels. Late one evening, a group of women gathered near the campfire to share stories, a rare moment of comfort amidst exhaustion. But that night, the conversation shifted to fear. One woman swore she had seen the silent girl near the washhouse hours before the maid went missing, her fingers trailing along the wooden wall like she was tracing the outline of something no one else could see. Another claimed she heard soft footsteps outside her cabin that night, footsteps too light to belong to an adult but too steady to belong to a frightened child. And then there was the oldest woman on the plantation who said nothing at first, only staring into the flames with hollow eyes, before she finally murmured that she had seen something else earlier that day, the strange girl sitting alone behind the stables, her hands covered in dirt. staring at the ground as if she had buried something. No one reported that claim to the overseer. Fear kept them silent. And perhaps fear was justified, because the next day the girl was found near the edge of the swamp again, her dress damp, her shoes caked with mud, her eyes fixed on a stretch of water that seemed far too deep for anyone to be lingering near. When a worker approached her to pull her away from the murky edge, she did not protest. She simply allowed herself to be guided back, her gaze never breaking from the swamp as though she had left something behind beneath its dark surface. Over the following weeks, the missing maid's name was spoken less and less. The overseer insisted she had run away, angry that nothing had been found. The workers stopped searching, too afraid of what they might discover. Life resumed its brutal rhythm, but the atmosphere had changed. Women walked in pairs, children were kept closer, and even the night noises, usually a chorus of insects and distant cries, felt eerily muted. Nothing seemed right, and the silent girl's presence only deepened that unease. People began watching her more closely after the disappearance, expecting some sign of guilt or grief or even fear, but she showed nothing. If anything, she seemed more alert, as though she had learned something from the experience, something that emboldened her. She moved differently, more confidently, with a purpose that did not belong to a child. And when she passed by the workers in the fields or stood quietly near the cabins at dusk, they felt the same cold sensation crawling up their backs, the feeling that she knew more than anyone else about what really happened that night, and that whatever she knew, she was not afraid of it at all. The pattern did not emerge all at once. It crept in slowly, like the dampness of the swamp that seeped into the walls of the cabins. At first, each death seemed like misfortune, the kind of tragedy plantation life produced regularly. A woman fell from the loft in the barn. Another slipped near the well and broke her neck. One collapsed alone in the fields, her body found hours later, cold and twisted in the dirt. Life was hard, cruel, and unforgiving, and no one questioned that suffering stalked the plantation like a shadow. But gradually, people began to notice a detail they had overlooked at first. The silent girl was there every time, appearing moments before or just after, always standing too close, always watching with those flat, unreadable eyes that held no fear, no confusion, no sadness. The women began whispering the pattern among themselves late at night, their voices trembling as they pieced together the events. They remembered that the girl was seen near the barn on the morning the woman fell, her figure lingering by the open doors as though waiting. They recalled how she had been walking around the well at dusk the day the second woman died, dragging her fingers over the stones in slow, deliberate circles. And the woman found in the field had told friends earlier that week that the strange child had been following her for days, always appearing just far enough to avoid confrontation but close enough to make her uncomfortable. The discovery that she had been near every single tragedy made the air heavier, thick with suspicion and dread. But suspicion alone was not enough to confront her. No one wanted to believe a child could be behind such horrors. No one wanted to consider that something so young, so seemingly fragile, could carry such darkness inside her. Instead, they tried to rationalize it, telling themselves she was simply drawn to commotion, that she was curious, that she didn't understand fear or danger. Yet each time the overseer arrived to inspect the latest body, she was already there, her face illuminated by lantern light, her eyes reflecting the flames like polished stone. She never spoke, never cried, never asked questions. She only looked, taking in every expression of pain, every gasp, every trembling breath. Those who worked closely with the victims began noticing something even more disturbing. In the days leading up to each death, the victims often mentioned feeling watched or hearing footsteps behind them when they walked alone. Some said they heard whispering, though they couldn't understand the words. A few swore they saw the silent girl lurking near their cabins at night, standing in the shadows with her head tilted as though listening to something beyond human hearing. These stories were shared only in secret, because speaking them aloud made the fear feel too real, too close. The overseers, of course, dismissed all of it. They had no interest in hunting rumors or entertaining superstition. Their concern was productivity, not the quiet terror that threaded through the workers' lives. To them, the deaths were accidents, symptoms of exhaustion and poor conditions. If anyone dared to hint that foul play might be involved, they were threatened with punishment for spreading lies. So the workers kept their suspicions silent, but fear seeped into everything they did. They moved differently, spoke differently, slept lightly, their ears tuned to every creak of the cabins, every rustle of the wind. Meanwhile, the girl only grew more comfortable in her strange role. She walked the plantation with an eerie calmness, slipping into places she had no reason to be, observing tasks she had never shown interest in before. Women noticed her watching them when they were alone, her gaze fixed on their hands, their faces, their breathing. She seemed to study them like an animal studies prey, not with hunger, but with a chilling kind of fascination, as though she were cataloguing their vulnerabilities for reasons only she understood. When someone met her eyes directly, she did not look away. She held their gaze until they were the ones who turned, shivering as they walked away from her. The more deaths occurred, the more people began avoiding isolated tasks. No one wanted to be the last one working as the sun dipped below the horizon. No one wanted to retrieve tools from the barn after dark. They moved in quiet pairs, whispering to each other, glancing over their shoulders constantly. Even the bravest men found themselves uneasy when the girl appeared, her presence weighty and unnatural. She didn't behave like a child, and she didn't react to fear like a human being. It was as though something had carved out her emotions long ago and left behind only the shell of a girl who did not understand why people trembled around her. The turning point came when one woman swore she woke in the night to find the girl standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her with wide, unblinking eyes. The woman had screamed, waking her cabin mates, but when they lit the lantern, the child was gone. Some believed the woman had been dreaming, others believed every word. But one thing became certain: no one dismissed the growing fear anymore. It became a silent law of the cabins that doors would be barred at night, that women would sleep closer together, that no one would wander outside alone once darkness took hold. Still, the pattern continued. More women died, each one connected to tasks the girl had lingered near, each one having mentioned her presence days before the tragedy. And each time a body was found, the girl appeared before the overseer did, slipping through the crowd without sound, finding the perfect vantage point to witness the suffering she seemed so drawn to. It was as if death called to her, and she answered, not with emotion or horror, but with the cold curiosity of something that did not fear consequence, punishment, or even morality. Panic spread across the plantation like a sickness, slow at first, then sudden and uncontrollable. Once the woman confessed what she had seen near the well, people stopped pretending the deaths were accidents. The truth, or something close to it, had finally been spoken aloud, and now it could not be taken back. But fear, real fear, does not bring clarity. It brings chaos, and chaos began to swallow the plantation whole. Women refused to walk alone. Children stayed hidden in the cabins. Men carried lanterns even in daylight, as though terrified the shadows might conceal something waiting to emerge. And through all of this, the silent girl moved as calmly as ever, untouched by the tension tightening around her, drifting through the plantation with the same eerie stillness that had marked her since childhood. The overseers, angered by the hysteria rising among the workers, demanded explanations. They questioned the woman who saw the girl at the well, threatening punishment if she dared spread lies, but the witness stood firm, trembling but resolute, insisting on what she saw, that the girl had been crouched beside the latest victim, her hands resting on the body, her face calm, unafraid. Still, the overseers dismissed it. They refused to believe that a child could be responsible for the string of deaths tearing through the plantation. To them, it was easier to blame disease, carelessness, or even exhaustion than to accept the possibility that something far darker was lurking in plain sight. Their refusal to acknowledge the truth only made the workers more fearful. Ignored by those in charge, they turned to each other for survival, forming silent alliances to keep themselves safe. But all their precautions did nothing to stop the growing sense that the girl's presence was tightening around them like a trap. Every day brought new stories, quiet accounts told in trembling voices from one cabin to another, warnings shared in the fields when overseers weren't listening, signs that something malevolent was moving beneath the surface of daily life. Some said they saw her wandering the fields late at night, her figure barely visible against the dark horizon, moving without sound or purpose. A few claimed she appeared at their windows, standing so still she almost blended with the shadows. Others woke to strange noises outside their doors, only to find small footprints in the dirt in the morning, leading away toward the swamp. A couple of women swore they heard her humming, soft, tuneless, unsettling, in the hours just before dawn, drifting through the air like something not meant for human ears. And though no one could prove any of it, the collective fear sharpened every suspicion into truth. The plantation owners, meanwhile, were too detached to understand the danger. They attributed the sudden drop in productivity to laziness and disobedience. They believed the workers were creating stories to avoid responsibility. But what they failed to notice, or refused to see, was the way the girl watched them too, her eyes following their movements with the same cold curiosity she gave everyone else. She did not fear them, nor did she respect their authority. She looked at them as though they were simply another part of the world she was meant to observe, another piece of a puzzle she was slowly assembling in her silent, shadowed mind. One evening, everything shifted again. It was near dusk, a time when people normally hurried to finish their chores and return to the safety of their cabins. But that evening, a group of women gathered near one of the secluded cabins, their faces pale and anxious. They were there because one of them, the youngest in the group, claimed she had found something odd near the swamp earlier that day. She wouldn't say what it was out loud. She only said it scared her so deeply she couldn't keep it to herself. So they followed her to the edge of the swamp, moving cautiously through the tall grass, their hearts pounding with every step. When they arrived, the youngest woman pointed to a small patch of disturbed earth, the soil freshly turned as though something had been buried there not long before. But what struck them was not the dirt itself. It was the object half hidden beneath the loose soil, a scrap of fabric torn from the dress of one of the women who had died weeks earlier. The sight sent a ripple of terror through the group. They backed away, unable to fathom what they were looking at or why it was there, and then, as if summoned by their fear, the silent girl appeared at the edge of the clearing. She emerged slowly, stepping out from behind a tree with that same soundless grace she always carried. Her eyes flicked from the women to the disturbed patch of earth, then back to them. She did not speak. She did not move closer. She simply looked at them, unblinking, her face expressionless. The women froze, unsure whether to run or scream or stand still. And in that tense silence, the girl's gaze seemed to grow heavier, pressing into them like a weight. It felt as though she were evaluating them, measuring their reactions, learning from their fear. The women fled after that, stumbling through the grass, breathless and terrified. But the image of the girl standing over that buried scrap stayed with them long after they reached their cabins. They knew then what many had suspected but feared to admit. She wasn't just watching the deaths. She was connected to them in ways far more intentional than coincidence. She was selecting her moments, moving unseen, leaving traces only when she wanted them found. After that night, fear reached its peak. No one slept unless exhaustion forced them to. No one left their cabins after dark. Every creak of wood, every rustle of grass, every gust of wind became a warning. Because by then, everyone understood something chilling, something undeniable. The girl wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was letting them see her, letting them know she was there, letting them feel her presence like breath at their backs. And that realization, more than the bodies, more than the whispers, more than the fear, was what broke the last fragile sense of safety the plantation clung to. They finally understood that the danger was not in the shadows. It was walking among them, silent and patient, with the face of a child and the darkness of something far older.